give a number of examples, but I should not be too long. Perhaps one sentence. This is all the more important when you want to create new markets. And you will not simply be able to, let's say, intrude into a market if you don't offer, let's say, if you're unable to share a certain kind of mentality. Now, the question I am asked to answer is about how do universities cope? Can they possibly cope with these needs? And as our chairwoman has already said, I belong to the so-called scientific part of university education. Yes and no. Yes, in the sense that what we are focusing on is on teaching informed by research. That's the ambition we pursue. And that means, of course, when you carry out a research project on a specific topic, not only in the business fields, but also in others, you ideally already find yourself in an international environment. So, fostering international research consortiums is one of the most important tasks of a university. And fortunately, here the European Union has really, let's say, fostered this kind of thinking. We are still far from having all our colleagues in such international consortia, but it's going better and better. Nevertheless, Professor Danielewicz has already talked about mobility. Mobility not only of students but also of the academic staff is of utmost importance. And here I think we are trying to shift cultures, and that's not an easygoing task. However, what is interesting is there are much worse countries than Austria, I would say, as far as mobility is concerned. I know countries, I have not told you that I'm a born Italian and I came to Austria many years ago to learn German, and after 35 years I'm still here. Italians, for instance, don't like to move at all. But even British don't like to move. First of all, because they think that their universities are the best in the world anyway, so why should they go abroad? And in particular, why should they learn a foreign language, as everybody speaks English? Mobility is certainly a very, very important tool to open the minds and hearts of people. But as you already said, we also have to keep in mind, is it only about opening hearts and minds, or is it also about real education, in the sense that at the end you have learned something which goes beyond culture? And this is something where also within Europe we still have a way to go. That is the mutual recognition of the teaching courses, of the curricula, where we still have to work on. Now, having our Member of Parliament here, no, I'm not going to bother you with all our complaints, but just one. All this is, of course, a matter of money, of resources, of being able to organize the exchange, be it of staff member, be it of students. I am well aware that not every university can do everything. So, as far as the universities are concerned, we have started to set priorities. Which kind of international research consortiums are important for us, which are not, or where we have to say, we have to skip it. With what kind of universities abroad do we cooperate? Where do we send our here we have established special relations with some and neglected others. It's the only possibilities to survive and to give the students what they really need. Moreover, all those selected forms of cooperation have to be evaluated after a certain period of time, because when I became a member of the rectorate of my university and became in charge of international relations, the first thing I discovered is that this rather small university compared to Vienna or others had hundreds of international relation contracts. And I said, how can this small university live up to that? And what I found out is that whenever somebody had an idea of cooperating with this or that university, a contract was established. Now, I simply looked into all these relations and found out the serious ones and the, let's say, less serious ones, or simply those who died away or withered away because the person was no longer there. And thus we set priorities according to this evaluation. I come to a conclusion by saying just one more sentence as regards leadership. I am not sure, let me be provocative at the end, I'm not sure whether even European societies, I'm not talking about Saudi Arabia where I have no experience of, even European societies are really prepared to educate a considerable chunk of our young students to be leaders. Because, as you said, leadership presupposes a number of attitudes, of critical thinking, you named that several times, which implies that people get contradicted, that people speak out, that they perhaps don't speak out always for good reasons, that is to be judged on the spot. But I think if we really want to exert leadership in the meanings the two of us have spelled out, you need more critical people, more outspoken people, and I'm not sure whether that is always cherished by our political establishment. Thank you very much for your attention.
Now we're coming to the host of this conference. Professor Abermann will give us a brief overview of the key factors and conditions and framework that necessitate international orientation in higher education, since you are also the head of the international office of this university.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to also look at this topic from the perspective of the host organization, so to say. To be honest, I had thought about opening this presentation with a question, namely the question to you: what do you think is the most relevant characteristic of a global executive today? You have actually already mentioned this, and you have actually quoted from the same study as I have looked at, so you already know the answer. Namely, the answer is the ability to motivate and influence people from other cultures. Now, we're talking here about global executives. How does this relate to the education that we provide here at the University of Applied Sciences, you might question? We're not training global executives. We are offering bachelor and master programs. So far, we do not have any MBA programs and no doctoral programs yet, excluding certain corporations, of course. So the question is, what can we actually do? And can we? However, the answer is we cannot. We must. We must do our share in order to prepare our graduates for the career path, potentially to become global executives, or maybe just generally mature citizens. So what's the rationale at our institution for actually doing internationalization? A very obvious one, and of course you have mentioned that also, is clearly we need to prepare our graduates for future workplace environments. And in all our curriculum development teams, we always have representatives of enterprises, representatives of the labor market, representatives, we are jointly owned by the Chamber of Commerce and the Chamber of Labor, so we have also the opportunity in this respect also to see both perspectives. So we definitely have this component integrated into our curricula. But it's also important that we design our curricula so that we can contribute to the personality development of every graduate. It's extremely important. We should not forget about that. Looking at the labor market is essential, but it's also important, as you mentioned before, and also you have mentioned, to educate, to provide well-rounded education and to support the personality building of our graduates. And last and not least, and obviously absolutely necessary, if we are considering ourselves a higher educational institution, we must participate, we must expose ourselves to the international scientific community in order also to provide quality assurance. All the internal measures that we might think of and devise and that are very relevant would not be adequate if we don't put ourselves to the test in the international scientific community. That's the test, the ACID test that eventually gives us the feedback. If our students go on exchange, can they really fare well at another institution, a renowned institution maybe? If our graduates are going abroad looking for employment, can they actually succeed? That's the question. And that's what we have to prepare them for. And that's, if we get feedback that this is possible, then we know we are on the right track. So, if we go on this climbing tour, so to say, to the heights of internationalization, what gear do we need in order to be able to do that, and what gear do we have to provide our students and graduates with, the climbing gear, so to say? We've mentioned this already before in your presentation, so I don't want to go into too much detail here, but then these are definitely the competencies, the skills that we need to integrate into our curriculum, not just in courses that explicitly deal with intercultural communication, but as a general approach. For example, openness and curiosity. You mentioned that, both of you, as an important element. And it needs to be mentioned again and again, because often it is overlooked that this is an important stimulus for learning in general, but of course also to be able to survive under quotation marks in this global world. So if we look at the measures that are required in order to achieve that end, it is definitely essential that an institution has a clear vision. Where do we want to go to? Do we really want to go to the top of that mountain, so to say? Are we satisfied with staying maybe at mid-level, or, which I hope we don't, do we want to stay in the valley at the foot of the mountain? And of course, if you've got a vision, you have to have a clear strategy and clear measures. Another aspect that was mentioned before, and I think you mentioned very much the stakeholder support on the political level.